What if the answers to living your true purpose aren't hiding from you? They're just spoken in a language you have yet to learn through dreams, intuition, those strange moments you can't quite explain. If you grew up within organized religion, you were probably taught exactly where to look for answers. But the divine has a funny way of showing up outside the boxes we've built for it. Today's guest, Caleb Matthews, spent years preparing for a lifetime of ministry until an unexpected shift forced him to question everything he thought he knew about how God communicates. What happened next sent him on a journey into dreams, intuition, and discovering how each of us holds a unique key to our purpose designed right into our DNA. Together, we explore why your greatest sense of purpose may not come from striving harder, but from rediscovering the joy and clues that have been calling to you since childhood. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Rich in Spirit.
Paid in full.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Iman.
Here, we believe you don't have to choose between spiritual growth and financial success,
ambition and alignment,
or healing and building an abundant life.
Join us each week to quantum leap with both proven, profitable systems and the spiritual insights that will light your way through life's greatest expansions.
Let's step into success that feeds your soul.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to our guest, Caleb Matthews. We're so excited to have you on today.
Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. Aman, Victoria. I've been looking forward to this one since we planned it. It is an honor.
I'm super pumped up, and I think this would actually be a great time to have Victoria lead us in some breaths so we can all get settled in and we can really hear Caleb's very interesting story. He has some fascinating things to share with us. So before that, it'd be great if we could all just settle in together and get grounded so that we can really listen and learn more about Caleb.
We're all going to take a deep breath into our nose. We're going to do 3 of these. So deep breath into the nose, feeling the stomach and chest expand, breathing slowly, holding at the top, and then sighing it out. Just letting go of anything that may have happened earlier today. And then taking a second deep breath, feeling your stomach and chest expand on the inhale. Holding for a moment at the top. And then sighing it out. And then final breath, deepest breath of the day. Well, not final breath, but final breath for this round.
Okay, so, turning that one over.
Deep inhale. Sucking in a little bit more air if you can once you get to the top. And then on the exhale, shaking it out. Letting it all go. Getting nice and present, getting into the body.
Thank you. I know personally I'm really high on the enthusiasm scale. So sometimes that means I get really caught up in the excitement, and those breaths are just so helpful to ground back into the present moment before we start. So yes, today we have Caleb on the show. I know Caleb from my Vancouver film production days, even before I worked in Hollywood. Now he's a motivational speaker, a dream interpreter, and spiritual strategist who helps people discover their purpose and live it with confidence. So Caleb, you have a really interesting origin story that I know Victoria and I want to hear more about. My understanding is that you were training full-time for ministry within the Christian church, and then there was some like betrayal, or I don't know, Victoria was talking about Game of Thrones earlier, and it seems like there's kind of that in your story. Do you want to share what happened?
Yeah, well, wow, nothing like getting right into the juicy story, Aman. You're like, woo, let's get into the betrayal. Woo! Yes,
Yes,
we definitely have a lot
please,
to talk about.
Can we get into the betrayal right away?
But yes, I trained for a good first quarter of my life thinking that I was being called to full-time ministry within the organized institutional Christian church. I like to preface it institutional Christian church because there is a difference, and we will get into that, between institutional Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, which are very organic, which was very much anti-institution. So really, I was ordained actually in my 20s. I was ordained into ministry. I traveled Africa, started at the age of 18 years old. My first audience, well, before I spoke to my first audience of humans in Africa as a missionary with my family, we went self-funded, by the way. So while my colleagues in their teens were getting stoked to party and buying clothes and, the girlfriends and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I want to go out and see the world through a different lens and to see what poor people live like outside of the Western bubble. And I truly encourage anyone listening to this right now, everyone listening to this right now, if you haven't had a chance to get outside the Western bubble, do it. Amon can speak to that. Victoria, I'm not sure if you've traveled out to the East. I presume you've done a lot of travel outside the West?
Victoria worked in India teaching breath work and some other things. Do you want to just, I don't mean to speak
Yeah.
for you, Victoria.
No, thank you. I was there for 5 weeks, and it was my first time in the East, and it was one of the best experiences of my life and very, very eye-opening. And yes, I totally agree. I invite everyone to do that for sure.
Yeah, to get outside the bubble. But that's really where it began for me. But my first audience, before I spoke to people, were my stuffed animals, actually. So the reason we got into Toy Story on your live broadcast the other day is because I have a collection of 120 stuffed animals. I gave away half of them to children less fortunate who can't afford toys because they were sitting in my crawl space for 10 years. But my captive audience, stuffed animals, when I was a teenager, were the ones I would practice speaking to. So that by the time I got in front of actual people, I was ready. So I didn't see, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Like, I have the butterflies a bit, but I saw stuffed animals. I saw the stuffed animals in the crowd. So when I thought, okay, don't bugger it up, don't mess it up, I saw stuffed animals. I thought, all right, there's no judgment out there. They're all just a bunch of living stuffed animals anyways. So let's talk. But I wanted to segue and just break for a minute for a second. What do you think about that? Is that on par for you ladies, or talking to stuffed animals? Am I the only one alone here? Anyone else did that?
So I would make out with Torso Bob in preparation
Oh
for
my God.
having a boyfriend. So, and I had a bunch of Beanie Babies as well that I'm sure I talked to at some point. So I think
Yeah.
that's really cool.
I had a million Beanie Babies. They were all cats, though. I had every cat Beanie Baby. And I think Caleb and we talked about this a little bit, but I had a whole town for them. And there were all these different relationship dynamics. And they had a town newspaper that I would make and distribute every week. And there was a mayor. And so it was really for me about the stories, which is what I do now still, is like storytelling in a different form. But, that was my film production background. So it's so interesting. Our stuffed animals have prepared all of us for our future career pathways.
That's right. And this is a real
or
point.
relationship
That's right.
and goals.
I did
Dreams,
make
goals,
reels
purpose.
with Torso Bob, and that were very funny. He's at my parents' house. Otherwise, I probably still would be. But yeah.
It's these are real things, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, especially ladies listening to this, because I know this is predominantly a ladies podcast of our audience out there. But the early years really do matter, and this is one of the 4 pillars of the C-Link that I have, and one of them is the early years of entrepreneurship, of innovation. We all innovate when we're young, when we're kids. So what we do in our early years sets us up for what we're doing in our adult years. I am very thankful that my first audience was stuffed animals, and I practiced for hours in front of my stuffed animals because my stuffed animals brought me to Africa, and from Africa and through ministry in those years and going to places like Stonehenge and talking on the radio in Africa to 4 or 5 different provinces and several million people, and then being on podcasts like this one with Victoria and Amon. If I hadn't practiced with my stuffed animals, would I be doing podcasts? Maybe not.
So you really attribute your experience now to the things that you were interested in as a child, and the things that really captivated your attention and your imagination as a child influenced where you are today. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Iman. Like, those early years really set the building blocks. And that's something that really, when I started putting the pieces together, I thought, okay, this is starting to make sense. Like my brothers, their nickname for me growing up was TTM, talk too much. That was my nickname, TTM. I always wanted to talk. So I talked to my stuffed animals. I even have an old photo of me sitting on the front lawn reading children's books to the neighbor's black lab. And he just sits there. And I just talk to him, and just like he's my best buddy and my pal, because most of the neighborhood kids just thought Caleb talked too much, so wouldn't listen to me. But the neighbor's dog would. Ace was very, very loyal to listen to every word that I had to say. Ace is probably over the Rainbow Bridge by now, but he was really, really helpful. My stuffed animals were helpful. Those years were helpful. But going along this train, just to fast forward a bit, those ministry years, going to Africa, going to Philippines and Asia, I thought that my course was doing full-time ministry. And then the institutional church got its claws on demanding hierarchy and submission. And this is where these two roads intersect. And Victoria and Iman, I want to hear your thoughts on this. But hierarchical religion, in my perspective and my experience, is very much tied to the toxic male-dominant culture that we see in the world today, where women are subdued and given less of a voice. And that never really sat well with me, because the Bible I read and what was being preached in the institutional church, they were not parallel. They're not running on the same track. What do you ladies think about that, about toxic hierarchy in the institutional Christian church, since we're talking about that, and male toxic dominance?
Victoria has more experience with actual church.
So I grew up going to Catholic school for the first 18 years of my life. And it always bothered me that, yes, there were nuns, but priests and bishops and the Pope, it was all very male dominated. And also the fact that priests can't get married, can't have children. And I see both sides of it, but I always thought that was a little odd, and something that I'm sure we'll get into later. The story of the Virgin Mary always bothered me, because I'm like, you have sex to make a baby. She's not a virgin. Why are we making sex into this like dirty thing that had to happen for her to have a baby? So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, the nuns thing and the women being subjected to, oh, you have a very limited role, doesn't vibe with me, because I go back to scripture and I go back to the pre-curse days in Genesis, Garden of Eden, Genesis, where it says that in Genesis chapter 1 that God created man and woman in his own image, male and female, he created them. The men like to leave that out. They just like to focus on Adam. But no, even man and women before the curse were created as equals. And where male dominance comes into the picture is after the curse. One of the results of the curse in the Bible says, the woman, the man will rule over you, and your desire will be for your husband. That's after the curse. Jesus came to restore humanity back before the curse to Eden. So when I see male dominance of women aren't allowed to speak in church, women aren't allowed to be in leadership, women aren't allowed to be in the fivefold ministry, that goes against everything that Jesus came to restore us back to Eden. Because when he resurrected, like in the Gospels, who were the first people that Jesus came to? It wasn't the guys. They were all locked in, afraid for their lives in the upper room. Oh my goodness, the Romans are going to kill us. Like they had very legitimate fears, but Jesus appeared to women first. And I always like to ask myself, why did he do that? Well, in Jesus's day, like in the 21st century, we have a big problem, in my opinion, between male dominance and male over top of female, especially in cults and institutional religion. But when Jesus came to restore us back to Eden, he went straight in the ancient world back to honoring the women. Now, in his day, that was very, very radical, because it was always the men that were the priests and, in the synagogue, and the ones that would go into the Holy of Holies to offer atonement for the nation as the mediator. Women weren't allowed anywhere near that. But Jesus loved to break the envelope. In fact, Jesus' main opponents were the religious Pharisees and Sadducees. It wasn't the Romans that was the main opponent. It was the religious system. But Jesus, on purpose, elevated and honored women. Why did he do that? To balance the wrongs that had been done by the curse. But that's my initial thoughts on that. Whenever we see in religion a male dominance, that's not what Jesus meant. So I always like to, within my own life, push forward that message that men aren't supposed to be over top of women as much as women over top of men. We're supposed to run as equals because the command in Eden was to fill the earth, subdue it, be fruitful, multiply as collaborators. But that's my thoughts.
That's so interesting. A couple things came up while you were talking. First is the quote that you gave, that man and woman are created in God's image. I know that has been translated different ways in different versions of the Bible. So I know the King James version of the Bible says, and man was created in God's image. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, well, of course it means man. It says man, but it means like the general humankind. And our language is very patriarchal. And that's a whole nother conversation, but everything is kind of default man. But it means men and women. And I think the majority of people take that to be men and women. And there are different translations of the Bible where it says men and women. But there are other people who take that to mean only man is created in God's image. I know this firsthand because we've talked about this on our podcast before, but my abuser used to translate that as, no, literally only man is created in God's image. And women are not. Women are created as this like side, inferior afterthought in man's image. So they're like a second copy. So he would use that to be like, no, women can't hear the voice of God. Women aren't connected to God. Only man is in God's image. Only man has the ability to connect to God, and really used that as a form of control, which is what I'm seeing the pattern being in these sort of institutionalized versions of the Christian church. Because as you mentioned, Jesus did so much for women's rights.
Yep.
Back in that time, it was radical for him to be speaking to women, to be communing with women, to be going to them. And there's so much removed from the history as well, I believe, of like when he was resurrected, the first person he went to, wasn't it Mary Magdalene?
That's right. That's right.
And her story, too, she's been made out now to be like, oh, this whore and this slut. A lot of people that are maybe more feminist, like me and Victoria, were like, it doesn't matter, or it's the sacred whore, or, there's all these different archetypes. But I think there's a lot more to her history than we're getting. She may have just been involved with other facets of like work that, and I don't know the full history, so I'm talking a little bit out of turn here, but when people don't understand something, they're really quick to put a label on it. And so she may have just been labeled a whore or put that way in retrospect because people were afraid of her power and the influence she had.
Yeah. Wasn't she potentially Jesus's lover? There's some people that think that.
Some people think that, yeah. I'm more of the perspective that Amon just alluded to. I believe that as the scriptures have been passed down through history, especially the King James butchered the biblical original translations to become, as we're talking about, more male dominant in its interpretation, to leave out women as being collaborators instead. Oh, it's mankind, it's man, it's men, it's men. But Mary Magdalene, I believe that she was made out to be this false image of being like a slut or a whore, because actually she's very much somebody who walked in her design. So we're talking about the DNA of design. She was that much confident walking in her design. In fact, the women that were all with John the Beloved, they were the ones that were at the cross when Jesus was at his lowest moment. All the rest of the guys, all the big super apostles that their institutional religion loves to talk about, like Peter and James and all these guys, they all ran. But besides John being Jesus' best friend, the women were at the cross. And I don't think that's a mistake, because they're the ones that had the guts. They had the guts. They could have been killed for just being there supporting Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was also very painful, I think, for everyone to see what he was going through. But for the women, they took that on, right? I mean, women go through so much pain in childbirth, and they took that on to see him suffering like that so that they could be there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the DNA of design, and you mentioned that maybe Mary Magdalene was fully embodied in her DNA of design. What is that in general for someone who maybe doesn't know what the DNA of design is?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a step back into the bigger picture. The DNA of design is really walking in our trichotomous being instead of the dichotomous being. Now, I will explain between those two. The trichotomous being is we have a spirit that has a soul, that has a body. The dichotomous worldview is we just have a soul that has a body, and there is no spirit. Spirit and the soul are the same thing, but there's no spirit. So walking in our DNA of design is, first of all, is the understanding that we are three-part beings. So we have a conscience, we have a spirit, we have a soul, our mind, will, and emotions, and we have our human physical construct. So out of that place, there are design types, and how we discover those is really how we see the links between what is around us in our day-by-day life, our night season. We're going to talk a little bit about that later, but all these links that are communicating to us around us, seeing the links, hence the sea link, right? These different aspects and these characteristics of the DNA of design, our spiritual design, comes out when we are seeing those links within our spirit, our soul, and our body. And I think one of the great tragedies is that we live in a world where most of the West, especially, lives only by the soul and by the body, but is not incorporating the spiritual element. But ladies, what do you think about that? A three-part being.
What is the difference between a spirit and a soul, your spirit and your soul?
So your spirit is your conscience. It's that inner engine of the heart that guides decision makings that's beyond just mental willpower, because soul is, I'm going to make a decision to do this. I'm going to posture myself in my conscious waking moments to do this. That's my mind, that's my will, that's my emotions. I'm putting my mind to it. I'm putting my soul into it. That's my soul. My spirit, my conscience is, just to give an example, say that I know that a decision is something I'm going to make, not like 9 times out of 10, my soul, I know it intellectually, I know it with my body, I know I'm going to go after this, but I feel that gut feeling, that gut instinct. Some people call it a gut instinct, but within my conscience, within the depths of my spirit, that no, actually, Caleb, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to go here. And logically and rationally, it makes no sense. But my spirit is that inner engine that's guiding within the conscience. There's a quote that I think of often and try to live by often, which the great Martin Luther said. He said, to go against conscience is neither right nor safe. Not against my soul, to go against my conscience. The conscience is connected to the spirit. That's my perspective.
Where does the subconscious fit into that?
Subconscious is a very interesting dynamic because our subconscious is often awakened at its heightened state within the dream season, within the night season, when our body and our soul are at rest. Our spirit is most alive and active in the night season especially, but when we are governing our soul and our body, then our spirit can come alive the most. Like what we did there at the beginning, when we were just focusing on breath, and we were focusing on just grounding ourselves. That's a very spiritual exercise. I don't find that for me personally, that's a physical or an emotional exercise, though it can be attributed to some of those elements. It's a very spiritual exercise to push out the outside noise and just to go deep beneath the surface. But hope that answers the question.
So you're saying the conscious mind and the subconscious mind are within spirit. Am I understanding that right?
Yes. I believe the subconscious is a direct branch in the tree off of the spiritual component within our human construct.
And then we have the body, which is obviously very easy to understand because we're here on this physical plane. How do
Right.
we understand the soul then?
Well, our soul is interesting because that's our day-by-day decision-making. Like I got on this call with you ladies today because my soul is excited. Like I'm very excited about this conversation. So I, at the same time, wanted to make sure that I prepared myself and some of what I was going to speak on and converse with you and really get into that element of reaching into my DNA of design, my individual design type to say, okay, I'm going to communicate in this way. So you could say my spirit is governing my soul. And that's something we go back to the Bible. We were talking about the Bible earlier. And it's often mentions spirit, soul, and body in that order. And when mankind received breath, we were doing breath there at the beginning, God breathed into mankind the breath of life. That's the breath of the spirit. In one of the books of the Old Testament, we see where Ezekiel has this crazy, bizarre vision of the Valley of Dry Bones, right? Really wacky, really cool book. And God says to Ezekiel, what do you see, son of man? He says, I see dry bones. He's like, well, speak to the breath. He didn't say speak to the soul. He didn't say speak to the body. He says speak to the breath. And that spiritual breath entered the army and they received life. But that's what I'm talking about there.
How does this relate back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with the passions that drove us as children and seem to have carried through in our lives. Where does that fit into this?
It's very much a spiritual connection because we have to have that childlike fascination, don't we, to be able to actually function in this life, to be able to go about our day by day business. I'm going to say something one of my mentors, he's passed on years ago, he used to often say about the childlike state. So we're talking about that. If you lose the awe, Caleb, he said to me, don't lose the awe. Don't lose the wonder. Don't lose that childlike joy that you had in those early years, even as an adult. Because if you lose the awe, you've lost everything. If I'm just going through the motions and I don't have that joy like I had when I was a child, speaking with my stuffed animals, speaking with the neighbor's dog, if I don't have that joy in what I'm doing in my career, my profession, if our audience doesn't have that, if the ladies, gentlemen listening to this don't have that, if you don't have that in your career, there's a problem. Somewhere along the line, you've lost the awe, you've lost the spirit.
Yeah, when I think of wonder and joy, I immediately think of nature because there's just so many things in nature that we can admire. And it brought me back to this acting class that Iman and I were, I don't know if we were in the same acting class, but we had the same teacher. And that was an interesting situation. But something he did really help me with is getting back in touch with that sense of wonder and awe that I had in childhood. And he did this by encouraging everyone in the acting class to go out and look at flowers, stop on your walk and just admire the flower, admire the veins in a leaf, pick up the earthworm, whatever it is, like you would do as a child. And you can get in touch with that at any point in your life. And when we get into adulthood, we're just rushing, go, 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 on to the next thing, when there's so much beauty around us. And I still do that to this day on my walks. We'll stop and take a picture of bark or something else is really cool. So if you're listening to this and you're wanting to get more in touch with awe and wonder, nature is the best place to start, in my opinion.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if someone has lost that passion from childhood and is feeling stuck and maybe feeling a little bit lost, how do they reconnect to that?
I would say it's time to go do some excavating. In the beginning, we talked about the early years of entrepreneurship, of innovation, the I of I principle. So how do we do that? Well, I would ask any of our listeners, ladies, if I had a room full of ladies talking to, which we do right now, come on, Victoria, and ladies listening to this.
Yes, it is mostly women listening, but we love you guys that are listening too. There are some men that tune in, and we really appreciate them because they're super solid followers. So we love you guys too. Don't feel left out.
Go back into your childhood to where you found something that gave you incredible joy. Now, I want to play the advocate as well. Not everyone had a good childhood. Some childhoods are very traumatic, and I want to give some encouragement to those who experienced rough childhoods. There are two sides to a coin. There's always a flip side. So if you had a very traumatic childhood and you're like, Caleb, I don't see any joy. I don't see it. I can't see it. Interpret the opposite, because darkness, devil, enemy, adversary, obstacle, whatever your language is for the opposition realm of darkness that tried to come against you in those early years, whatever came against you defines you. So flip the opposite. If you had a childhood full of alcoholism or drugs or abuse, or there is just relational disconnects, interpret the opposite. And the opposite of that is where your potential is. That's where the joy is.
So what would you say is the opposite of that? Like, let's say someone has alcoholic parents. What is the opposite of that?
Well, alcoholism is very much connected with controlling environments and subduing individuals to have to cater towards the alcoholic. So I would say to that individual that you're somebody who is called and designed within your design type to actually inject people with a infusion, not of alcohol, but of joy, and you're a catalyst for creating an environment where people can drink from the spiritual waters and see beneath the surface. That's what I would say to somebody who's experienced an alcoholic upbringing. Or maybe it's a seer gift. Maybe, like, real example, and she doesn't mind if I share this, so we've talked about this before. My mother was raised by alcoholics, but she has a seer design type. So whenever she went to bed, she would have to always be on alert because her parents would have these alcoholic parties in the house and she didn't know who they were going to invite over. It was very traumatic. But she was also a seer. She had vivid dreams in the night season. She would have vivid experiences. And so really that can also be tied to the seer gift as well too, because alcoholic environments is often your senses are heightened, right? So there can be some of that seer realm development within the positive aspect of that as well too.
It sounds like even when we've gone through something really awful and traumatic, you can walk out of that and find some superpowers and maybe some indicators of the role in life that you're meant to step into to really live out your purpose and to help others and embody your design.
I would say so. Absolutely. It's like the California gold rush, right? Like to use this example from History Speaks, when they went up and they left land and home and they went north up to Alaska to pan for gold, they had to get down the muck to get to the gold nuggets. So audience, sometimes to get your gold nugget of your DNA of design, finding what your design is, what your purpose is, you got to go through the muck. And the proportion of your valley is directly proportionate to the height of your mountain. If your childhood sucked, if you had a really rough upbringing, if you have one blow after another, you feel like, Caleb, I'm treading water. Victoria, I'm treading water. You have really, really good potential, because the deeper your valley and the deeper your pain and your struggles, the higher your mountain. You can only speak to somebody with authority from the suffering that you've gone through. So I want to say that for anyone out there who feels like, man, I feel like my head's spinning. You have a great punch, a great design type that needs to be welcomed in the earth.
Can be rocket fuel, right? It's
Yep.
rocket fuel if you use it the right way to catapult yourself to who you're meant to be and the levels you're meant to be serving.
That's right.
So you mentioned design types and you mentioned seer and catalyst. Can you give us a little explanation of all the design types?
Sure. So I'll go down through the 7 and then I can give a brief description. So we've got seer, catalyst, builder, navigator, steward, healer, and activator. Those are the 7. And within each one of those, there's a special superpower and element that the earth needs, that we need, that people need, that we need for each other. Because if we had a world full of seers, we wouldn't have people who build. Like seers can see things before anybody else can, but they need the builders too. And the builders are the ones that can step into an empty field and see the blueprint before anybody else sees that. And the seers are the ones that they get the blueprint. The catalysts are the ones that break ground while everybody else is still following the butts of the 100 other people in the one direction. The catalysts are breaking ground in this direction. And the navigators are the ones that are charting uncharted territory. The activators are the ones that walk into a room and say, okay, it's time to ignite your gift. The healers are the ones that bring incredible calm towards traumatic situations. The stewards are the ones that can manage finances and manage wealth and manage relationships and manage those connections at an incredible higher altitude and a higher level as well there too. So those are some of the descriptions there.
How does knowing your design type help you in your day-to-day life? Why is it important for someone to know their design type?
I would say it's like stepping into a vehicle and not having the manual of knowing how to actually drive it, not going through the test, not going through the ringer, not going through the experience. You have the car, you have the structure, but you have no direction on how to drive it. It's the same thing with our trichotomous being, our spirit, our soul, our body, our DNA of design, of driving that path, because I'm going to function in my life a lot differently, knowing my design as a seer, my design type is seer, versus not knowing what I'm doing, versus not knowing what I'm going to do next. I'll give an example from history because I'm a huge fan of history. And I'm going to highlight a woman because I like championing women. I'm with 2 amazing women right now. Victoria and Iman. This woman that I'm talking about here is Rosa Parks, the great Rosa Parks. And she was a catalyst because she refused to go to the back of the bus when in her day she was supposed to fall in line. But without Rosa Parks, we don't have the civil rights movement. We don't have Martin Luther King Jr. We don't have I Have a Dream without Rosa Parks deciding, no, I'm not going to go to the back of the bus. I am going to stay right here and I'm going to defy the institution, the white, male-dominant institution. Thank God for Rosa Parks, because without her standing, maybe we'd still be going through deeper struggles than we're going through right now.
And in terms of people's purpose or a career that they should choose, is that impacted by their design, or within each career or job, you can use that skill set in a unique way?
I would say both for sure. Like for me as a seer, I couldn't stay in my 10-year corporate retail job of working in sales. I was good at sales, but could I stay there the rest of my life? No, I couldn't. Maybe somebody else could, and they feel that they actually could stay in that structure. But our design type is able to be very helpful in navigating us to the next step or navigating within that specific environment. So it depends on the person, really depends on the person.
Now, I think you had some guesses about mine and Victoria's design types you shared on our live when you tuned in a little while ago. What are your guesses for us? We took your quiz. Caleb has an awesome quiz to figure out your design type, which we will link in the show notes for anybody that wants to figure out exactly what their design type is and how that can serve them. But do you have guesses about what ours are?
Yes, I do. I could be either completely on the mark or completely off the mark, but I'm going to say Amon, yours was seer, and Victoria, I'm going to say yours is probably a catalyst.
I thought you were going to be the seer.
You're right.
That's the very spiritual wisdom. I'm right?
Yeah.
You're the seer then, Victoria?
She's the seer.
Nice.
I'm a fellow seer. Iman, what are you?
What was your guess for me?
Okay, so when I was doing the quiz, I saw that there were 4 questions and I thought that there were 4 types. And I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was the one where it was like the questions about the research and getting the information and taking action. It was something in there that I was like, this sounds like Iman.
Okay, so when I was going through the quiz, I really thought it was going to say a couple of different things. Like, I really aligned with a lot of the questions that seemed maybe they were going towards seer. But then there were a lot of times when I was like, no, that's not right for this scenario. And then I actually had a question for Caleb. Does your design type change throughout your life? Or is it always the same?
You're going to have predominantly the same design type, but you can have a secondary one. Like that's a little bit more advanced, but I would say predominantly your main design type is going to be consistent throughout your life. You're supporting one. You can flow in and out of the other design types because actually, I'm going to spill a little bit of the beans here, which I'm sure your audience is fine with. But my 7 design types I actually got from the Bible, actually, Book of Romans, the 7 gifts of the Spirit.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
So I repackaged it in a way, we're talking about non-institutionalism here, of speaking in non-Christianese, because I have friends who are in the New Age. I have friends who are Islamic. I have friends who are Buddhists, who are Jewish, who are polytheists, who are Wiccan. I have a really cool story about a witch, actually, who I interacted with, who I got to co-host her show with her. Me as a follower of Jesus and her as a Wiccan. It was a crazy story.
I want to tune into that.
Yeah.
I think there's so much beauty in Christianity, and I think there's so much truth in all religions. It just sort of seems like they come from the same source, and there's just various interpretations of oneness. So everybody has their own opinion on that. And I love, too, that Christianity, like most Christians I talk to, even if I have a slightly different view, and I grew up in Islam, but I'm definitely more of like a non-labeled believer of God and oneness and spirit. And so I love when I talk to Christians, they're very tolerant and very understanding for the most part, because I think that's what's important, is listening to everyone and connecting. And we might have different language for the same thing, but I think it's so beautiful that you took very old, proven truth, substantial truth from the Bible, and you've brought it into this modern language. So that's a cool thing that you did.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So which one are you?
Okay, I know, I'm getting there. Okay. So I asked that question because I felt like what I got now is different. And actually, I think Victoria got it right. But I feel like this is a new thing for me, because some of the questions I was like, that was me 2-3 years ago, but that's not me now. And I was a little bit surprised because, yeah, right now I'm doing a lot of these like systems and research, and I got builder. So my design type was builder, and I was really surprised by that. And I was reading through the design types, and it just seems like at different times in my life, I've been different types. So I don't know if builder is my main one, or it's just like really the type that I'm hyper focused in right now, because we're building the podcast, building my rental property. There's a lot of building going on, and I'm implementing different types of systems with that. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. What was your guess for me, Caleb?
I thought it was seer, and I think the first
Seer.
time we talked about, like, before you were doing all the building, correct me if I'm wrong, Aman, but when we first talked when I was down in Mexico and reconnected again, I thought you had taken the design quiz before and you got seer the first time, and then you took it now and you
That's
got builder.
possible. Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, your season that you're going through right now, I think, has a really big part to play and of navigating in and out of these different design types, because that's what the Spirit of God is that spirit, that breath of being able to dig into that and to be able to operate in different design types in different seasons, but while still having a predominant design type. But yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I guess in this current season, I'm embodying the builder type, and Victoria's the seer type, which I think was spot on for her. What are some of our strengths working together, and where are some places we should look out for in collaborating?
Awesome. I love this. This is great. This is really, really good and very helpful, I think, for a lot of our audience who collaborate with very strong leaders in their sphere of influence. But I would say the positive of the builder and the seer together is like that, like the Field of Dreams, right? The old baseball movie. If you build it, they will come, right? Like the builders really have this amazing ability to be able to see the vision at its very end, even though there's nothing there. And the seer gets that blueprint to help build that vision from that deep realm within that spirit, the subconscious, that bubbling beneath the surface. So they're very, very interconnected in a way where one is planning and seeing the structure and the organization. The other is receiving the blueprints of how to actually build that structure in real time. So those are those strengths intertwined together. I would say places to look out for that potentially could be a little bit of just some obstacles or hiccups is the seer has so many different blueprints that are coming at them that it could
I've switched my niche for my business like 8 times in the past year.
Yeah, so I'm speaking your language. There we go. But you have so many different blueprints. All right, let's do that. Let's do this. It's like having 10 books that you're wanting to read and you have like 2 chapters of them done each, but you haven't finished a book. That can be a bit of the, obstacle there. For the builder could be one that's so focused, laser focused on that one vision that they're maybe necessarily not measuring out the different possibilities that could be, but they can get very narrow focused if they're too much in that element without intertwining with the other design types. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You said there's a secondary one that people usually have. Is that kind of just intuitively we read it and see what resonates, or is there another quiz?
Well, that's a good question. I think it comes out with intuition of knowing the seasons, which we're talking about that before, especially this building season that you're both in right now. So that intuition, but there's going to be other content to come for sure. This is just wetting the whistle. And by the way, audience, if you're listening right now, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get more into the design types. Not only do I have a quiz, but I also have a YouTube channel where I'm cranking out with my team, because I have a team that I manage, of like 4 or 5 videos a week, shorts, long form videos, all catered towards discovering your design within neuroscience, within history, within the early years of entrepreneurship, within understanding mysteries of the night season, within these different approaches. So my YouTube channel is youtube.com/@thesealink. And I really appreciate you hit subscribe. By the way, there's no cost to the channel. At least right now, I don't have any paid content on the channel. All of it is free. All you got to do is click subscribe. I will have a developed course that I'm working on right now that will be paid. But for that, I like to offer and give it back. So that's one of the places you can find more besides the quiz.
That's so generous of you. And your YouTube channel is great. There's some very interesting videos on there. I'm wondering, what is it like for someone who maybe they're listening to this, they're interested, they want to know their design type, they want to know how that can help them in their life. What is the transformation that happens when someone works with you, when someone starts to figure out their design type and live by that? What's possible?
Well, it's looking through life at a lens of not for what do I have to do next as a chore versus when you're in your design type, it's what do I get to do? What do I get to share? What do I get to be able to pour into others? I'll use an example from a client that I've worked with that trains people who play pickleball. He's a fitness trainer for pickleball players as well as a soccer referee that referees provincial soccer. And last year, when we talked and we had one of our sessions, he was doing a lot of things, but the joy and the awe wasn't there because he didn't really know what he was designed to do fully. And we had this conversation recently. But after one of our sessions, after he's thought about it, after he started to invest in his talents in those different areas and go after what truly brings him joy within his design, life is a completely different picture. It's not what do I have to do next? It's what do I get to do? What do I get to share and help others? And for him, his design type was very much somebody who's an activator, and he loves activating people of all ages to help them move in pickleball and in fitness. And he wasn't getting that at his previous job. But that's just an example. Not what do I have to do? What do I get to do within my design?
And you also do dream interpretation. Can we ask you about that?
Can you please ask me about that? And if you both have a short dream you'd like interpretation for, I would be more than happy to provide that because that's a big element. That's a big element within discovering what our design is speaking to us, what God is speaking to us, energy, spirit, higher power, whatever your language, whatever audience's language is. But dreams is a big portion. A third of our lives are spent dreaming. So there's a lot there.
Yes. So I have two questions. First is, how did you learn that? And second is, you mentioned the night season a few times. Is that when we're sleeping and our soul and spirit is in this other realm? What is the night season?
Yeah, the night season is that time between when your head hits the pillow and when you wake up. It's a big portion of our life. Scientifically, by the time we reach 60, we'll have spent 20 of those 60 years dreaming. So the night season is when our body and soul is most at rest and our spirit is awake, it's alive, it's communicating to our human soul, communicating to our body. And I can't stress this enough. It's such a big part of our lives. And for me, I started vividly dreaming in the night season at the age of 6 years old. And I was raised as a homeschooler. So my mother raised me and my two older brothers in the Hebraic art of dream interpretation. So we learned how to write our dreams down, journal our dreams, treasure them, search the ancient texts, search the scriptures, search history of really how God spoke to people, to men and women through their dreams, and how to actually treasure them so that when we've had them ourselves, we actually saw them as invitations to our design, not just random happenstances.
Do you believe that we are everyone in our dreams? Is that true? I've heard that before. Like Iman could be in my dream, but technically it is me being represented by Iman in some way to tell my subconscious something.
Yeah, I believe that when we see other people in our dreams that they represent certain characteristics of our spirit. But if you're asking me, am I everybody in everybody's dreams?
Is every character in my dream me?
I would say no, but I would say it's more or less, maybe not necessarily wording it like that, but more or less every character in your dream, whether it be Amon, whether it be a Caleb, whether it be somebody that you know, whether it be a stranger, is an element of a picture of what's being communicated to you in your life. So if that's maybe what you meant that way, then I would say yes, but I would say they're supporting characters in the message that's being communicated to you by your higher power.
Okay. So similar but different.
Yeah.
Do you have a dream, Victoria?
Okay, so speaking of Game of Thrones, which, what do you call it? The night season? That is a very Game of Thrones. I feel like there's something similar in the show that has that name, but
The night watch?
yeah, I was having dreams for a while, on and off, where whenever my partner was in my dream, there was something where it was like he was walking away from me and I was like, "No, I need your help with something, or I need you to do something." And he would just be like, "No, I'm leaving." Or there would be something where I was being abandoned in some way in the dream, which is not at all what's happening in reality. So it was very strange. And they stopped. I haven't had them in a few months, and we've been together a little over 2 years. But anytime he was in my dream, it was usually kind of like a negative anxiety type dream. And I just
Mm.
thought that was very interesting, and I was like, Is he me?" And it's like something about me feeling anxious within myself, or and I went on ChatGPT and looked it up, and I was like, "Okay, that kinda makes sense," but I would love to know your interpretation. I know it's still kind of vague, but
So just to understand, if I understand correctly, your partner was in your dream. He was around you in a certain setting and he was anxious and you kind of felt his anxiety.
well, he made me anxious because he would be, like, walking away, or he would, like, be
Ah,
leaving me somewhere, or we would break up, or even cheating. Like, there would just be something traumatic happening in the dream.
mm.
But in waking life, that was not at all what was going on. And so, like, why does this keep happening?
What's his name?
Lou.
Lou. And if you could describe Lou in a few words of characteristics to describe him as a person to me, since I've never met him or know of him, what would you say Lou represents?
He's very loving. He's an artist. He's funny. He is a very happy he's a very positive person for the most part. He's very, he, like, fixes cars. He's a painter.
So here's what I say. And by the way, for those listening as well too, as you've made it to this point, amazing conversation. What I'm about to say here is what I say to every single person, man or woman, female or male, who I do dream interpretation for. That is what I'm about to say, take it with a grain of salt. Chew on the meat and spit out the bones. And I take no offense. That's what I say to anybody. So here's what I believe your dream is saying to you, Victoria, that you are seeing a part of your creative spirit, because Lou represents that creative joy, fun like element. You are seeing a part of your creative spirit that makes your soul anxious. And there's this wrestling between your spirit and soul, and you're not quite sure sometimes about leaning into the spiritual side of things. Your soul is trying to compete with your spirit and that creative element side of things. So there's a bit of a clash between your builder side and your seer side. And I think the encouragement in the dream is not to be anxious when your spirit is calling for you to step into an opportunity, and to let your spirit lead and to govern your soul in those moments. But I could be completely off or on, but I think there's an invitation to deeper creativity and joy within that element, even if your soul's like, this doesn't make sense.
No, I think that is very spot on, because also between the two of us, I'm the more controlling one, and, like, needing a plan, and, like, "What are we doing?" And he's very go with the flow, and we don't need a reservation, and we walk right in the restaurant, and everything's fine, everything works out, and meanwhile, I'm like, Why didn't," and so yeah, there's this, and so him just kind of in the dream, walking off and doing whatever, and I'm just like, "Wait a minute, what are we supposed to be doing?" But that is the creativity, that is the flow, so that, and I definitely feel pulled as an actor, and in the more spiritual space, I definitely do feel pulled between those 2 things of, "Oh, I'm giving too much attention to this. Am I doing enough of this? And what am I actually supposed to be doing? What is my purpose?" Instead of just being like, "Okay, this is what I'm putting energy toward now. This is what I'm putting energy toward today," and it can all kind of happen as it's meant to.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
nice. I would dare to say that what I see there as well too is that maybe sometimes it feels like within your soul that you're cheating, no pun intended, because you felt there was cheating happening, but
Mhm.
actually it's your spirit calling you to say, okay, this is a priority and it's okay to do this. It might feel like cheating, but it's not. Actually following the intuition of your spirit versus the soul.
It's very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It feels that
Yeah.
resonates.
Cool.
Beautiful interpretation. So, if
Hmm.
people wanted to talk to you about having their dreams interpreted, that's something you offer?
Yes, it is within, I have one-on-one sessions where people can book with me called Link Up. So if you decide, oh, you know what? I love the YouTube channel. I love the DNA of Design quiz. I love the newsletter. I love all this, but I need a one-on-one, a good 1 hour with Caleb, do some in-depth dream interpretation, design type, analysis of my design type, and really going through that in connection to my dreams. Then I do link up sessions, paid sessions, where I have coaching booked availability in my calendar on Calendly, available through my website. So I can, of course, share all the links there too. But I do make that available for our audience who's like, hey, I want to get into that. So absolutely.
We'll put all your links in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My website, www.calebmatthews.net. When you navigate to there, you will see a whole bunch of goodies, including in the top right corner, the DNA design quiz button, where you can go directly to the quiz, take the quiz. It takes less than 5 minutes, and you discover which of your 7 design types there are. Of course, as well, too, my newsletter on Beehive is there if you want to keep in touch with twice a month newsletters. Totally free, won't spam your inbox, I promise. And then you can navigate to my YouTube teachings from there too. And my channel, please subscribe. Everything helps. And then we can go from there.
And can you just finish this up with that idea that you shared at the beginning of this pre-curse Eden? And you said this sort of toxic male dominant culture that we're living in is not the design that God intended, not the design that women are supposed to be working and walking in. So what to you is that beautiful, everybody's living in harmony, everybody's walking by their design type? What does that look like?
What that looks like, especially for the ladies listening, what that looks like for all of us, ladies and men as well too, is there is no abdication to mediation. There is no institution telling you that only the guys get to do the stuff and the ladies get the leftovers. No, 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 no. It's everyone walking fully side by side as Jesus intended it, as he restored us back to Eden. As part of his sacrifice on the cross was to restore us to Eden, to be able to walk again in the garden. And that can happen now. It doesn't have to be some idyllic paradise that happens after one dies. No, no, no. That's walking in that right now, where everybody gets to walk in their design type, where Victoria gets to walk in her design type, where Iman gets to walk in her design type, Caleb gets to, our audience you get to walk in your design type and love what you're doing in an environment where you're not controlled and told what you have to do by a set of rules by any institution, whether that be Christianity, religion, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, any of that, but you're walking in that organic connection with the Spirit of God, with your higher power, as Jesus intended it to, and your design type, where you're fully free without a mediator, because that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And I left the big corporate world. I left the institution because the institution of Christianity, of top-down hierarchy, does not allow for a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of people like you and I that are walking in our design type. So, audience, be encouraged. There is a place for you. There is a place for you on the earth where your design type is fully free to be able to function without mediation, without rules, without hierarchy, without male dominance. And you know that you're in the environment that Jesus always intended in Eden when you see environments like this where men and women can collaborate without there being this toxic ego involved.
I do have a question about the Garden of Eden and the story of Genesis. What is your opinion or your thoughts on the story of Adam and Eve deceiving Adam and that whole thing? Like, oh, the woman did it. Do you think that that's accurate, that it was like this wonderful paradise and then the woman listened to the snake and it's her fault?
I like how we went there because I believe I'm going to use a sports analogy to answer your question. You know how everyone likes to beat up the goaltender and say, oh, it was the goalie's fault that we lost the game, right? That's the way that I like to say this in this example. I believe that Adam had just as much a part to play in screwing it up in Eden as Eve did. They both had a part to play. It wasn't just Eve's fault. It wasn't just Adam's fault. They both knew what the blueprint that God laid out was, which was you can eat from any tree in the garden except for that one. So I don't like this narrative that it was just Eve's fault and Adam got tricked into it and we can just blame the woman and put most of the blame on her. No, Adam knew what was right and wrong as much as Eve did. So by him agreeing to eat of the fruit, he's just as much his fault as Eve was. So the way it was written, we can never truly know because the Bible has been translated through the game of telephone tag over the years from the original script.
Mhm.
Who knows? Like the original script could have said that Adam and Eve were both there at the same time and they both were deceived at the same time. Because the reading, you're right, Victoria, it makes it seem like the woman made the first screw up and the guy was just dragged into it. I don't believe that at all. I believe that they both made a decision. They both had an opportunity to be able to collaborate together and say, you know what, we got to think about this. No, this isn't a good idea. Let's not do this. So I don't believe in the narrative that it was all Eve's fault. I believe that Adam has just as much to blame as well.
Am I remembering this correctly too? Doesn't God get just as, or if not even more upset with Adam for lying to him about eating the apple? Because he comes,
Yeah.
he's like, what's happened? You guys are ashamed. You're shy. Something's happened. He's like, nothing, nothing, nothing. And God is just as mad at Adam for lying for, or even more so than the fact that they did the act of eating the apple.
Yeah, because Eve was created from Adam's rib, right? So Adam was around a little bit longer than Eve was, but he should have known better, even more so. You're responsible for what you know. And you're right. God turns to Adam first and says, like, what are you doing? Why are you hiding? Adam, why are you hiding? Like he made that decision with Eve to hide first. Let's hide from God because, we're afraid because their eyes were open, right? Adam was held in the check first. And then, of course, Eve was held in the check. But yeah, Adam fudged up as well, too. So they both had to deal with the consequences. But yeah, I would say in our Western society, I think one of the things that we tend to do just in our human nature is to say, oh, well, if this came first and that came second, then whatever came first is first or second is second. And it's like, no, Jesus actually turned that upside down. He's like, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So it doesn't really matter who's first or second, who's created first or second. I think the main point is they both made an individual and corporate decision to reject God's command.
And it's funny when you were talking about earlier the pre-curse world and returning to like this state of equality, I can hear, not from our audience, but I can hear the pushback of people feeling like we're trying to say men don't deserve power or like men don't have a place in the new world. And like we're just talking about equality.
Yeah.
Right. But for some men, they hear equality and they think they're going to live in a world where what women are going through now is what they're going to go through. And they're like, we absolutely don't want that. We're like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about moving together, walking together side by side.
Walking together, because that was the great command to man and woman in the Garden of Eden. Be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. Multiply and let your gifts, let your design manifest and collaborate.
I was looking over here at my notes because I wrote down something about, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I can't find the question, but something about women being leaders, but traditionally the man is the leader. And of course, you can be a leader in your own way. Both men and women can be leaders. But how would you say that can be balanced in a way that is collaborative, like an example of how that would work?
An example within like a relational construct or just like a business professional construct or what kind of example?
Both would be great.
Yeah. Well, with a professional construct, I like to say that, I know this might sound cliche, but male or female in a business perspective shouldn't be the point. The point should be who's the most qualified and skilled for that position. To use an example, because I love my sports, who used to be the assistant coach for the Seattle Kraken in the NHL. She's a woman and very qualified for the job. And I just laughed when I saw the comments online and social media of all these butthurt guys saying, oh, well, like the NHL, like I want to go back to the good old days. Why are women being allowed to be in position? Because she's qualified. Because she knows what she's doing. So yes, she should be the one being the coach behind the bench because she's better than a lot of the candidates. So that's an example, being able to collaborate with the head coach who's a man, but the assistant coach is a female. They have to be on the same page to be able to make it work within that business construct within the NHL. Within that relational construct, I'm going to use my parents as a perfect example because I love my parents. My mother raised us as homeschoolers. Of course, she was a teacher. My dad was the one that would come and grade the homework when he came home. But my mother was the one that created the family business called Back to Eden Landscaping. And I'm so thankful for her doing that. My dad could have been like, oh, only I can create a business for our boys. No, it was my mother who did that. She had the vision. She has the seer gift. She has that development entrepreneurial gift. And she was able to flourish in that. And my dad was able to flourish as well within being able to be the builder and to being able to build the construct of what that would look like and manage the books and manage the bookkeeping. But my mom, she was the one doing the landscaping business for wealthy multimillionaire clients. And my dad was able to support her in that. Now, a lot of guys would have a problem with that. They say, oh, no, John's got to be the one that does everything. And my mom just has to be the happy wife that supports. Well, no, that's not the way that it is. But that's what I mean by an example. My dad managed the books, and my brothers and I worked with my mom. My dad helped as well too, but worked in the field in people's yards with the clients and actually negotiated the deals with the clients themselves. That was my father's job. My dad managed the books, but he's still very good at it.
Are you saying that it's more important to be within the strengths of your design versus the strengths of being a man versus the strengths of being a woman, that maybe we're told like the more nurturing one, it's more about our strengths and our design as an individual?
100%. If I'm at a position where I'm like looking between that and that, I'm going to say design every time. I will always max over design, and the gender is secondary. And I think our culture's got it backwards. It's like, no, it's got to be design, because if I put my dad in a position where he's supposed to be doing what my mom is really good at, he's going to hate it. In fact, many times he did. He was like, I don't like this. This isn't me. And my mom having to do all the analytical stuff in the books and everything, it's not her thing. It's the design that matters.
Those are some awesome questions, Victoria. That was really interesting. And Caleb, you talking about your mom and her entrepreneurial spirit and her ability to build a business made me think of actually in Islam. And we go back to the sacred texts, right? The Quran. The prophet's wife, first wife, but that's a different conversation. The prophet's wife was much older than him, and she was a very successful merchant. And it was probably only due to the fact that she was supporting him and supporting his lifestyle and allowing him access to be able to go off into the mountains and connect with God, that Islam is what it is today, right? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, got this message from God and was able to share it with people, but it was because his wife had the ability to support him financially. And she was the merchant and the breadwinner. And that allowed him to live out his design type. And a lot of people nowadays forget that. And obviously, Islam has its own challenges with the position they've put women in. But in the Quran, in the origins, women are held to that standard of like, yeah, they can live out their design type and they can be the supportive breadwinner, the creative. There's a lot of that if we go back to ancient times before all of this control was put onto it. So I just thought that was really interesting parallel.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that because it's not shared or talked about.
Like even within the Bible as well, like in the scriptures, in the New Testament, one of the churches that Paul went to, he wrote letters to Priscilla and Aquila. He wrote the woman's name first, not the man's. And so often people get that reversed, especially in institutional Christianity. Oh, the man's always got to be first. Well, no, that's not true. It's design type, baby. It's design type.
That's right. I remember I was doing Christmas cards one time, the first year I was with my ex-partner. And yeah, I put my name first because they were all my friends that I was sending the Christmas cards to. I was like, from Iman and who shall not be named.
Voldemort.
And, he got so pissed off. And this was very early on in our relationship. So the pissed off was like at a different level, but it was like, you put your name first? And I was like, yeah, they're my friends. Like, well, they're going to be so weirded out if your name is first. And he was just like, oh, okay. I see how it is. Obviously, that should have been a red flag to me, and it was. But of course, I excused it away in all these millions of different reasonings. But yeah, for him, it was super, super important that the man's name came first, no matter what. So let's break out of that. But I love what you're doing. I love what you're championing, people getting in touch with their own design type and finding a way to live their truth and their DNA. We will link everything to connect with you. And thank you for being so generous with your time and your information. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to sign off to our audience before we wrap it up here?
Absolutely. I'd love to do an activation blessing if I can for our audience, because I believe that life and death, but especially life, is in the power of the tongue. What we declare we become. And I wanted to leave our audience with some parting gifts of speaking to each of our individual human spirit and exhorting that DNA design to come forth. So if I can, I'd love to be able to do that, if that's okay with you, ladies.
Please.
Please, yeah.
So everybody listening right now, Victoria, Amon, our audience, especially our large audience of women, and the few guys, the supporters that are out there listening, just speak and release a blessing to your human spirit to step forth and come into your design. Maybe nobody has ever told you that before. Maybe no voice has ever welcomed you to step forward and take your place in the earth. But I speak that into your spirits, to govern your soul, to govern your body, to walk in your design, and to be invited to be able to function where there is no mediation, there's no religious control, there's no control from Christianity, from Judaism, from Islam, from any hierarchy or religion, but it's just God inviting you to step into your design, to release that into the earth. And I speak a blessing and a grace upon your night season, that your dreams would be a Jacob's ladder, that blueprints and special assignments would be released, that angels would come and visit you, that you have divine direction, that every part of your spirit would become ignited, and that you would see your design in every flower and every blade of grass and every smell of coffee and every taste of chocolate, every laughter in a child's voice, that you would experience the awe and the wonder of a God who loves you, and of an overshadowing ability to walk in freedom, in liberty. And to my sisters, to an audience of sisters listening to you right now, that you would step forth and take your place. No male dominance can stop your design from entering into the earth. So welcome that, to flourish and to prosper and to be a champion in every state, in every country, and every place that you step your foot, that you've been given dominion over the earth, as was in Eden, the original design that God and that Jesus always meant. So bless you. Thank you for listening. And that's Caleb signing off from the C-Link. But Victoria and Aman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Yeah, I hope everybody can go throughout their day with nice blessings. And if that spurred some interesting dreams in your night season, you know how to connect with Caleb now. And we'll be back next week. But thank you all so much for listening.
Your purpose rarely arrives as a lightning bolt. More often, it's revealed through the clues that have been calling to you all along. Your dreams, deepest joys, and the soft nudges you keep feeling but haven't fully trusted. If you resonate with Caleb's message, you'll find all his information in the show notes below. And if you love conversations that challenge your beliefs, expand your perspective, and help you live an extraordinary life, hit subscribe. This is Rich in Spirit, Paid in Full, and we're just getting started.